Greetings everyone and welcome to another one of our free Friday community classes. We do these every Friday right here on the YouTube, covering a whole variety of topics under the general banner of plant spirit work, green sorcery, herbalism, spiritual herbalism, green animism, and all that good stuff. But today we're going to go out into the proverbial weeds a little bit and talk about something that is not exactly plant spirit work specific, but is definitely dovetailed in with our work in the green realm, and that is paganism. You hear me say this word a lot, heard lots of other people say this word a lot, and I thought that it would be helpful, since a few people have asked over the last month or so, if I gave you my definition of paganism. And before we get into the good stuff, I will put the disclaimer. This is my definition, right? There are, of course, academic, scholarly, anthropological, historical definitions of what paganism is. All of that is valid. All of that informs my own experience of paganism and my own definition. But what I want to present to you today is the three things that I think are essential to a pagan practice, or a pagan worldview, or a pagan experience, meaning how we go out into the world and experience the world. I think that pretty much every pagan identifying and academically pagan tradition that I've had the pleasure of learning about probably fits these three check marks, check, 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 pretty easily. There are, of course, going to be some exceptions to every rule, but my hope is that for folks who maybe don't identify as pagan or don't walk an existing pagan path, and that's kind of me. I kind of focus my work on working with the plant spirits, although I do draw from my ancestral lore, especially medieval through late English wort cunning lore and Anglo-Saxon lore, of course. I wouldn't say necessarily that the entirety of my path is a strictly pagan one. I'm not following any structured form of paganism, but I definitely fly the pagan banner. So, three things to me that make my path pagan, and three things that I think you will find in any pagan practice that you look at. First is that paganism is essentially world affirming and not world denying. What does this mean? If you look at a lot of the late big dogmatic spiritual traditions and religions, there is a proclivity towards denying the world, seeing the world as an illusion, seeing the world as inherently sinful, seeing the world as a trap or a test that a person must navigate in an appropriate way in order to earn access to reality, the real existence, heaven, or the celestial realms, or whatever the case may be. So we see in a lot of these traditions a world denying philosophy, meaning that where we live, the body that we're in, maybe even our minds and our emotions, and of course the physical material world that nourishes us, is not real. It's temporary. It's best to be avoided. It's best to see it as a trap or an illusion or a temptation, and that we should instead focus all of our attention towards a non-material or a spiritual or a specific place, which is the truth, right? That is not paganism at all. Paganism is unapologetically world affirming, meaning we do not see the material, physical aspect of the world as a trap, as an illusion. We see it as real, as valuable, as meaningful, and in certain ways, depending on the perspective, as eternal, right? We understand that the shape of things now may not be the shape of things forever, but shape of things will always be. And so you will find in pagan traditions an embracing of the world. Non-pagans often refer to this as nature worship, right? Which I understand, but I don't think that that's completely accurate. I don't know that people in pagan paths worship nature as much as we embrace it. We adore it. We see it as a perfectly beautiful place to be, with no need to try and deny it or transcend it or ascend to some other level of reality, right? Nature in and of itself is our home, and we work hard to lean further and further into the ways of nature rather than get further and further away from it. Wrapped up in this world-affirming view is animism, some form of animism, that the world, as Professor Graham Harvey defines it, and I use his definition always because it's the most succinct I've ever had, the world is filled with persons. Not all of those persons are human, but all of them deserve our respect. So wrapped up in this world-affirming experience of life, we also understand that this world is itself inhabited by many, many beings who may not be human, that are fully conscious, fully aware, fully sovereign spiritual beings, just like we are, right? We deny the idea of human exceptionalism and embrace the idea that we live in a world that is alive and vibrant and full of persons and filled with relationships and potential, and we work hard to deepen our relationship with the world. You can get into semantics and start splitting hairs, as those of us raised in cultures that are predominantly Christian or Christian influenced are wont to do. Well, if the world is everything, then what happens when you die? That's up to you. Maybe we'll do a class on that beyond the scope of this a little bit, but ultimately it doesn't matter, right? That engaging fully in what's happening here and now is the only way to really receive the fullness of what's available here and now. To deny it, to always be focused on what's happening after death with no real awareness of what that actually is, seems wasteful to the pagan perspective, right? So our traditions of paganism are world affirming and fundamentally animist. Next, the importance of sacred reciprocity in pagan traditions is fundamental. That we do not live in a vacuum. That everything we do is an offering to the world around us and creates a response. And that the highest expression of spirituality is reciprocity, hospitality, relationship. Okay, that's it. If you were to cherry pick one aspect of all pagan traditions and have that be the thing that you work on the most and the thing that you embody the most, let it be reciprocity, and your life will be filled with peace and plenty. So reciprocity means that we take nothing for free, that we understand the sacredness of the gifting cycle, that I give to you to create space in my life, that you may return gift to me, which creates space in your life, which I then return gift to you infinitely. This not only tells us how we should relate to other humans, that we should be giving openly to other people, our knowledge, our time, our love, our protection, all of that, but it also tells us how we should relate to the world itself, to the spirits of the world, and to the various deities of our tradition. That underneath all spiritual practices is an awareness and an engagement of this cycle of sacred reciprocity, that we make offerings to the spirits and the gods and the ancestors of our tradition, being aware that when we make that offering, it creates space for a return blessing. And that kickstarts a cycle that is infinite, that we then call a relationship. Right? Relationship is what we call when two persons, whether it be two human persons or a human person and a non-human person, are engaged in a cycle of sacred reciprocity. So we are world-affirming and animist. We are engaged intentionally and consciously in the sacred act of reciprocity in whichever form it may take. And last but not least, we are aware of and constantly seeking engagement with the interconnectedness of all life. We understand that every single thing that happens is connected to every single thing that happens. We understand that there is no way to do anything that does not influence everything. And this is beautiful because it means that every act of magic, of healing, of art, of beauty, of kindness, and of love ripples out and nudges the entirety of the cosmos further and further into states of harmony and further away from states of chaos. Similarly, unfortunately, every act of chaos, hatred, violence, all of that nudges the universe further and further into states of chaos. If you're interested in this, most of what I practice when it comes to interconnectedness comes from the teachings of the philosopher Empedocles. So you can look his stuff up, very interesting. But all of the pagan traditions have these beautiful symbols to help us understand interconnectedness. Maybe it's a web or a world tree or, a weaving, the symbol of weaving threads, as in the Norse Norns, right? That everything that happens adds to the tapestry of what exists. As a matter of fact, when people have asked me, where did the universe come from? Who started it all? Who created it all? My answer is the same always. The cosmos has no creator. The universe is the manifestation of an infinite number of relationships. It has always existed. It will always exist. And all of the relationships that happen define what happens next. And this is where the virtues of many pagan paths come in, okay? That what we choose to do now, how we choose to act, how we choose to think, what our mental atmosphere is, what kind of flowers we grow in our internal garden, what we do in this moment defines what is possible in the next moment, right? If you think about the symbolism of the world tree, and that's the symbol I use in my own meditation and engagement with this idea of interconnectedness, that branches don't grow out of thin air. Branches grow from the material before them, right? If you go look at a tree, you've got the little growth nodules all the way along. This section of growth creates the space for the next section of growth, creates the space for the next section. So every single thing we do is laying the groundwork for not only what's possible in the future, but also what's most likely and where there's the most ease. So how we behave in the moment gives us the tools that we have in the following moment. The seeds that we plant now bear the fruits that we eat in the future. So, world affirming and animistic, sacred reciprocity, paramount to the practice of the spirituality itself, the most paramount action. Reciprocity is an action, it is something done. And interconnectedness, that everything that happens influences everything else. Everything that is done affects the whole. And the plants, by the by, teach us these three things. When we engage deeply with the plant spirits, when we engage with works of plant sorcery, of green animism, of plant spirit work, of spiritual herbalism, healing, and magic, it is not long before the plants begin to put these teachings in our hearts. They are who I got these three teachings from and have kind of distilled them down into these three pithy points. They're generally a lot more chatty about it than I am, but they will teach us that reciprocity is the most important way to engage, right? This is how we do our plant spirit work. That interconnectedness is the way that the fruit that a tree drops onto the soil today becomes the fertile soil for new growth in seasons to follow. And the world affirming nature of the plants, that they will put their roots as deeply as possible into the earth and reach as strongly as possible into the sky, opening up, being fully embodied and fully present when and where we are. So the plants teach all of this, which is one of many reasons why plant spirit work and plant lore is fundamental to pretty much every pagan, animistic, nature-based spiritual path that you'll find. All the lore is there, all the practices are there, all the engagement with the plants are there. So, for folks who have been curious, what is paganism? What does paganism mean to somebody who's doing plant spirit work? What does paganism mean through a plant-informed lens? of folks who are walking a pagan path but also like to work with plants. And what does this term mean for people who don't engage in that way? Hopefully, this is all helpful. Now, we do classes here every Friday, as I mentioned, but if you're interested in this material, if you find it inspiring and helpful, I invite you to join me over on Patreon. We do constantly running courses with lessons posting every Monday. We do an advanced class every month, Q&As, vlogs, all kinds of good stuff. That's happening over there to thank you and to enter into a sacred reciprocity with you for this work, that I will give you as much of the information as I can, and your response in sacred reciprocity can be to support my work with a few bucks a month on Patreon, and then I'll just keep giving you more. So come hang out with us over there. I've also got a couple links to some other classes down below that I think you will find very interesting. And until next Friday, in peace and plenty, I'll see you soon.